Shalom. We come together to commemorate the 20th anniversary of September 11th, 2001, a dark day when Al-Qaeda terrorists, with their perverse understanding of Islam, coldly and cruelly murdered nearly 3,000 in New York, Washington, and Pennsylvania. It was the worst single act of terrorism perpetrated against America in its 245-year history. The terrorists murdered indiscriminately. The victims were diverse in faith, race, and nationality from 77 countries. The number of fatalities continues to grow from initial exposure to ground zero toxins exacerbated by the pandemic. We come together above all in memory of those who perished and in empathy and solidarity with those who lost their loved ones and friends. We mourn the deaths. The victims were innocent human beings created B'Tselem Elohim in the image of God. We remember each as a unique individual and reach out to their families whose lives were indelibly altered in a moment's time. We come together to give thanks for the heroes who put themselves in harm's way on that horrible day and made the ultimate sacrifice. We remember them and their grieving families. We are grateful for their fellow first responders who continue to protect us. We come together to assert that 20 years later, even as we live with ongoing threats, we will not be intimidated and we will not be terrorized. We will continue to assert the American values that the terrorists tried to destroy on September 11th, 2001. Yes, we were forever changed by 9/11. And American thinking and action of the last 20 years has significantly been in response to that day. But no, the terrorists were not able to destroy our way of life, their ultimate goal. Our spirit is not dimmed. Our hope is unabated. We at American Jewish Committee, AJC, believe in the great gift of American religious freedom and diversity and its power to heal. Interreligious relations are a bedrock of AJC's commitment to defeat anti-Semitism and all forms of hate. That is why we commemorate this dark day by listening to our partners in our fellow Abrahamic faiths, Christianity and Islam. We will honor the thousands who perished on 9/11 by telling the stories of 5 who were lost. AJC CEO David Harris will share his reflections on this 20th anniversary of 9/11. We will conclude by joining together in prayer. We welcome a dear friend and partner of AJC, Reverend Proto-Presbyter Dr. Nicholas Kazarian, Director of Interfaith Relations at the Greek Orthodox Archdiocese of America. Father Nicholas, please.
Thank you, Noam. And good morning. It's an honor to be with you today. First, allow me to thank AJC, David Harris, its CEO, and Rabbi Noam Marans for their invitation to participate in this important initiative as we commemorate with deepest emotion the 20th anniversary of the September 11th terrorist attacks. Today is a day of mourning for all of us. We are all being affected either directly or indirectly by the events of that day, events that continue to shape the global community as well as our ability to live together in peace and in trust. We continue to pray for all who were lost that day in the terrorist attacks of New York, Washington, D.C., and those who perished in Pennsylvania. Today is a day of unspeakable sorrow, and the Greek Orthodox Archdiocese of America wants all of you to know that we stand together, we pray together, we remember together. And every year, we gather in front of St. Nicholas Church and National Shrine at the World Trade Center to offer unto our Heavenly Father the names, the souls, and the memories of those who perished 20 years ago. And tonight, as the sun sets, the rebuilt St. Nicholas Greek Orthodox Church will be illuminated from within for the very first time. As you know, St. Nicholas Church was the only house of worship destroyed during the terrorist attacks. As such, the new church is not only a Greek Orthodox church, but it belongs to all New Yorkers, to all pilgrims, to all visitors that will enter its doors. It belongs to all the American people that are seeking a place of silence and peace, a place of prayer, no matter religion or belief, a place of reconciliation and dialogue. This very vocation of St. Nicholas Church has been clear from the first day of its reconstruction, and we are particularly proud and grateful for AJC's donation to rebuild the church in the aftermath of these tragic events. If I may, I would like to share with you these very inspiring words from His Eminence Archbishop Elpidio Forrest of America. He says, "The rebuilt St. Nicholas Church will be an everlasting memorial to their lives. It will also be both a spiritual home and a spiritual hospital for all to come and find healing and fellowship." This is why I feel so blessed today to be with you in this interreligious setting, with you, Rabbi Noam Marans, and with you, Oronesha Fariad, and all the participants for this time of virtual, although real, fellowship of love and reconciliation. May the memory of the souls of our departed brothers and sisters be eternal. And may the reconstruction of St. Nicholas Church be a sign of resilience and reconciliation in our country and in the world. Thank you.
Thank you, Father Nicholas. We welcome another dear friend and partner of AJC, Oronesha Fariad, Director of Outreach and Interfaith at the Adams All Dulles Area Muslim Society Center, and a leader in the Washington Muslim Jewish Advisory Council, co-convened by AJC and Muslim partners. Vanessa, please.
Thank you so much, Rabbi Noam, AJC, and all our esteemed guests here today. Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalam ala rasulillah. When 9/11 happened, I happened to be in New York City. That's where I grew up. It was a day that I don't think I will ever forget for so many reasons, because that was the starting point of so many things changing in my life and the things that affected me going forward. As a child, I came to the United States as a refugee from Afghanistan. When the Soviets had invaded, we were forced to flee and we went into Pakistan as refugees, lived there for 3 years, and then we were lucky enough to come to the United States through the refugee program. And connecting that to what's going on today, there's still a lot of emotions and a lot of things that we as Afghans go through, we as Muslims go through, that resonate back to 9/11. As I watched one tower in flames, in smoke on the TV, I actually didn't even realize it was happening. I thought it was a scene from a movie that someone was playing so early in the morning. And then I saw the second plane come in and I knew for a fact something was wrong. And then within a matter of minutes, I saw names pop out that I could properly pronounce, and I could see how people would relate those people to me. And I just froze. I didn't know whether I was supposed to mourn the people who had just died and the people who are going to die and how are they going to get out. And I see people throwing themselves out of the building and I see people running on the streets, pure chaos. I don't know what was going through me at that point. And then at the same time, these people who have hijacked my religion, who advocated for certain violent acts that are not part of my religion, became front and center news for everyone to watch and point fingers. And I was 5 months pregnant with my second child. And I thought the best thing for me was to hide in my house because I was visibly Muslim. Everybody knew me in my neighborhood, what was going to happen. I've got people say curse words to me. I've got verbally assaulted on the train. I literally had to squeeze myself down, slide down the chair in my car because at the stop sign, a lady realized I was Muslim and she started yelling and cursing and stuck her middle finger at me. Even till now, here that I live in Virginia, I see people saying things to me or looking at me a weird way and not understanding who I am. And then I realized a few years ago that I have to be part of a movement to change this narrative, to allow people to see who we are as a community, to see the American Muslim community for who we are and not keep repeating the repetitive cycle of being associated with violence and extremists. Our faith teaches us to be peaceful, loving, law-abiding citizens. And so for that, we had to take part in that as American Muslims. Now we're in different parts of the country, in different work areas, in different fields, to show people that our religion promotes us to be part of the American fabric, to hold up the Constitution, and to be loving and peaceful neighbors to everyone. But 9/11 brought this awareness in so many different ways that I probably won't be able to express it in the 3 to 5 minutes that I have here with you. It's a constant reminder. When my daughters were chased down the streets in Reston by a man who was just spewing anti-Islamic hate and Islamophobia to 2 girls aged 12 and 14, and they had to hide in the garage because they were afraid for their life. But now we're at a place where we have to show people that we are not them. But we're kind of a bit tired of that also, because that's not our narrative. We want people to know us for who we are. So come to our mosques, come to our homes, listen to what we have to say, and let's advocate for each other. Whether it's Islamophobia or anti-Semitism or racial inequity, we have to stand together and make sure that we're leading Americans towards a way that we're still going to be recognized as a country that people come to for refuge and who come for respite, a country that is loving and accepting of people like we are today with the refugees coming in from Afghanistan. Thank you so much, and peace be with you.
Thank you, Huranessa, for those deeply personal comments. And thank you both to Father Nicholas and Huranessa for everything that you represent that we felt so profoundly today, and for being the wonderful partners you are with AJC and the wider Jewish community. Thank you. We turn to our remembrances of those who perished on 9/11. Our selections are adapted from the New York Times Portraits of Grief that were published for many more AJC staff colleagues.
Madeline Amy Sweeney never went looking for fame, but fame found her on September 11. Her 15 minutes were the last of her life. Mrs. Sweeney, known as Amy, was a flight attendant aboard American Airlines Flight 11, the first plane to strike the Trade Center. She called a ground supervisor by airphone and relayed information about the hijackers that gave the FBI a head start on the investigation. Mrs. Sweeney's grace under pressure did not surprise her husband, Michael Sweeney of Acton, Massachusetts. She would have said she was just doing her job, he said. Congressional and state officials in Massachusetts wrote letters to President Bush asking that Mrs. Sweeney be awarded the nation's highest civilian honor. With it, Mr. Sweeney hopes to be able to tell his children, Jack, who was 4 at the time, and Anna, who was 6, about their mother's bravery that day. Her career took her to Bali and Hong Kong, but she also found adventure on the Colorado ski slopes and Cape Cod beaches. With Flight 11 nonstop to Los Angeles, she kept a standing date for lunch with Lynn Blaylock of Irvine, California, who was supposed to meet her at the airport that morning. She was an amazing, amazing woman, Mrs. Blaylock said, remembering their devil-may-care road trip out west after college. On December 14, 2001, Mrs. Sweeney would have turned 36, so those who missed her gathered at her favorite Mexican restaurants on 2 coasts. In California, they reflected on the woman who always saw the silver lining. And in New Hampshire, Melanie Bergerson collected paper messages to her oldest friend and put them inside a balloon and set it free to touch the sky.
Herman S. Sandler was a presence, said Thomas F. O'Neill, his business partner. When Herman walked into a room, you could not fail to notice. He had an enormous confidence and a wonderful laugh. He looked like Daddy Warbucks, a tall man with a shaved head. He loved being out on the water, in the Hamptons, in Palm Beach, on his boat. He had a permanent tan. Mr. Sandler and Mr. O'Neill left Bear Stearns in 1988 and started their own investment banking firm, Sandler, O'Neill and Partners. It opened in a little office on Lower Broadway in 1988. The office was furnished with card tables. You had to unplug the copying machine to make coffee. When Mr. O'Neill's father, a retired police officer, first laid eyes on it, he said, "You sure you guys aren't making book here?" Sandler O'Neill grew from 7 guys in a makeshift office to some 170 employees occupying the 104th floor of 2 World Trade Center. Mr. O'Neill credits in large part Mr. Sandler's confidence that the firm would succeed. He had a favorite expression, and he named his boat after it, Mr. O'Neill said. His favorite expression was "no problem." It's just that simple. No problem. That's exactly what he meant. Herman Sandler's wife, Suki, a beloved AJC volunteer, managed the AJC Oral History Library, which was eventually gifted to the New York Public Library.
Harriet, can you please unmute?
Sorry about that. David T. Woolley. Anyone could see that it was a strange combination of jobs, fighting fires and interior decorating, but not David T. Woolley. Captain of Ladder Company 4 in Midtown Manhattan, he also put up wallpaper on the side, turning it into a family affair that included his son, brother, and cousin. He did that because my mother was always asking him to decorate around the house, said his son, David Jr. He changed the wallpaper so often, and he was so good at it that he decided to make it his second career. And he did it since 1985 or 1986. Sure, hanging wallpaper did not quite pack the rush of running into a blaze, but in Captain Woolley's crew were his brother Bert, another firefighter, his cousin Jeff, and his son. It was time we spent together, and it was almost like not working, David Woolley Jr. said. As they beautified houses, Captain Woolley, 53, would tune into a politically conservative radio station. Then his son would switch the dial to a liberal station. And that's how it went between the two of them, listening to politics, debating about it, and laughing over it. Captain Woolley's son made fun of him when he took a job putting up wallpaper in the Westchester home of Bill and Hillary Clinton. Meeting them did not change the captain's political leanings, but Captain Woolley was what his son called a people person. And he told his son afterward that the Clintons were nice and personable.
Pauline Tull Francis lent her operatic soprano voice to her church and largely reserved her dance moves for family gatherings, where she would be on the dance floor the first chance she got, said her daughter, Debbie Williams. A native of Barbados, Ms. Tull Francis, 56, was partial to reggae, calypso, and other rhythms of the Caribbean, but she could also groove to Ella Fitzgerald and Celine Dion. Ms. Tull Francis, who lived in Brooklyn with her husband and had 4 grown children and 5 grandchildren, was also a nurturer with a big, radiant smile. She was always feeding someone, as Williams said. She just had to cook. A food service employee at Cantor Fitzgerald, she also helped feed traders on the 104th floor of One World Trade Center, where she started her workday at 6 a.m. Among the condolences that poured in after her body was recovered a week after the attacks, one in particular touched her family deeply. It came from a woman who had never met her, but whose husband, a broker who was also killed, had often told her how wonderful Miss Tull Francis was. That was confirmation of the kind of person my mom was, Ms. Williams said. She had a big heart. She hated to see people hungry.
Abe Zelmanowicz's family used to nag him about not being married. But although he never found a mate, he did not miss out on the experience of raising children. Living with his older brother, Jack, in Brooklyn, Uncle Avramel, as Mr. Zelmanowicz, 55, was known within the family, was deeply involved in the upbringing of his nieces and nephews. My children were his children, his brother said. My grandchildren were his grandchildren. When their parents were alive, Mr. Zelmanowicz, an Orthodox Jew, thought nothing of walking 3 miles each way to visit them on the Sabbath. He loved music. everything from Andrea Bocelli to the Beatles, and he was so handy that he could build a sukkah, a temporary hut for the festival of Sukkot, without using nails. In death, Mr. Zalmanowitz has been celebrated by President Bush and people around the world for remaining with his quadriplegic friend and colleague, Edward Beyea, after the attack on the World Trade Center, where they worked as computer programmers at Empire Blue Cross and Blue Shield. But to his family, this sacrifice was typical of Mr. Zalmanowitz's nature. Had it been a casual acquaintance, his brother said, he would have done the same thing. He could never turn his back on another human being.
I hope you can hear me now. We had some technical difficulties. I have switched to a different device. Thank you, Harriet, dear AJC colleagues all. David Harris has led AJC since 1990. David sets the highest standard for advocacy on behalf of the Jewish people and is an indefatigable defender of human rights. David, please.
Thank you, Noam, and good morning to everyone. Like many, there are certain days in my life that as an American, I cannot, will not, and must not ever forget. One was Friday, November 22nd, 1963, the assassination of President John F. Kennedy. And another was, of course, Tuesday, September 11th, 2001, when I was arriving at the AJC building in New York, exactly at the moment that the first plane hit the first tower. And as I walked into the building, our security guard said to me, David, there was just an accident downtown. Sounds pretty horrible. And for some reason, without knowing much more, I had a sense that it was something other than an accident. And a few minutes later, of course, came the news of the second plane crash into the World Trade Center. Allow me a few random reminiscences of the day and the days to follow that are indelibly etched, not just on my mind, but from head to toe in my very being. America was caught by surprise. No one had foreseen or anticipated this. There had been no discussion about the possibility of such terror attacks on the American homeland, much less on this mega scale. And so the 24/7 news cycle, which needed to provide information and material, went into high gear. Every single news channel suddenly brought out all the so-called experts, the experts who had not foreseen September 11th, but were now filling the time of the channels, trying to tell us what was going to happen next. And of course, they really knew nothing, but at the same time, they were there to speculate. And at that moment, it could be still more attacks. Was America at war across the country? Were our dams, our New York Stock Exchange, our ports, our electrical grid, were they the next targets? Hour after hour, we were hearing about all the possibilities yet to come, even as we were witnessing the tragic effects of the 4 attacks. And so the sense of pervasive fear and anxiety and uncertainty, helplessness engulfed so many, whether at AJC or across the country. And yet at the very same time, strange as it may seem to say, there was a sense of unity within America that was something quite remarkable, and all the more so as I think 20 years forward to now, when we are such a divided and polarized and disunited country in so many ways, the sense of we're all in this together in just the small ways. The streets of New York suddenly became very quiet and calm. No one would honk. people would look at each other, not with suspicion, but with a certain kindness, like, hey, brother, hey, sister, we're all in this together. We could be next. That sense of unity did not last very long, but it was a sobering reminder of what could be. And hopefully not only if it was triggered by nearly 3,000, not deaths, but murders of innocent people here in New York and in Pennsylvania. And at the same time, we had another sort of storyline that was affecting us at AJC. It shouldn't be forgotten. The anti-Semitic ecosystem began working in overtime. I remember that on day 2, September the 12th, we received a fax. Some of you younger may have to look up what the word fax means, but in those days, a relatively popular form of communication. The fax came from the leadership of the Jewish community in Greece, saying to us that the newspapers in Greece were filled with stories suggesting that 9/11 had been the work of the Mossad, of the Jews, of Zionists, of Israelis, and some even asserting that obviously this could not have come from others because others weren't smart enough. So the Jews, in their fiendish way, had manipulated this whole story using the 19 hijackers and assassins as puppets in order to advance the Jews' nefarious deeds. And the request from our friends in Greece was not only to disabuse the media of this notion, but actually to provide the names of the Jews that we already knew of who had been murdered on 9/11 in the World Trade Center or on those planes. And here we were frantically trying to help identify at least some names, even as it was early on and there was so little known, in order to confront this notion of 4,000 Jews stayed home on 9/11 because they had been advised by the Mossad or some other nefarious Jewish network to stay away while the non-Jews were being attacked and killed. So even as we look today at the rise in anti-Semitism and the conspiracy mongering this time around COVID, 20 years ago, it was the rise of anti-Semitism and the conspiracy mongering about those fiendish, devilish Jews who had manipulated these 19 Arab assassins to do the bidding of the Jews. There were other indelible memories for me. Among them, of course, and Noam referred to this at the beginning, the remarkable courage and bravery and selflessness of the first responders. As people fled downtown Manhattan, there they were rushing to downtown Manhattan in any way they could, and it was not simple. Most traffic had stopped in New York. Public transportation had stopped. The bridges and tunnels between Manhattan and the other parts of New York and New Jersey were shut down almost immediately. And there were the people walking, bicycling, running with their gear toward the burning towers in order to risk their own lives to try in a vain effort to save the lives of others who were trapped there. And anyone who passes a firehouse today in New York City is very likely to see 20 years later the names and the photographs of the firemen in those individual stations who gave their lives on or in the immediate aftermath of 9/11 to try and help save others. We learned a lot about American deficiencies in not just intelligence gathering, but intelligence sharing. That ever-present competitiveness, even between American agencies that wanted to deny each other vital information because they wanted to be sort of first to know, had to be overcome. And 20 years later, we can only hope that there's a seamlessness now in the intelligence agencies, and there are many of them in this country, that puts the country first over the institutional ego of any one of the organizations. And in this respect, though, I have to say something that really, to me, impressed me deeply. Even with the exposure of that disorganization and lack of sharing, and even as there were these so-called experts showing up on television and now telling us what would happen next, having not foreseen what happened on that fateful day, this country did not experience in the ensuing days and weeks and months the terrorist attacks that so many feared would come. And it was not entirely by accident. This country mobilized. It drew upon this extraordinary strength and resilience and determination of a country that said, we will not allow other such attacks to happen. And we must give credit, and the story is not fully known even to this day, of all of the unsung people in Washington and across the country who went to work on overdrive to help ensure that there would be no further such attacks of this magnitude at a time when we all felt so incredibly vulnerable. And lastly, as Father Kazarian said, AJC didn't simply want to witness or observe or lament or cry about what happened, though we did, and we do. We wanted to act in whatever way we could to reaffirm and defend our values, our beliefs at a time of national crisis and mourning. And that's why among the very first things we did was to reach out indeed, as the Reverend said, to the Greek Orthodox Church. St. Nicholas had been destroyed. We wanted to be part of the group that rebuilt it. We are builders, we are not destroyers. We saw what happened, the scapegoating and the demonization of American Muslims, of American Sikhs, who some believed looked foreign and therefore must be Muslim. And we spoke out and we reached out and we called on our government and we called on the media and we called on civil society to not yield to the attackers and their ideology, but to reaffirm our beliefs, our insistence that we are as a nation one with a shared and common destiny. So we reaffirmed our outreach to our sisters and brothers in other faith communities, other ethnic communities, and we condemned any attempt to point the finger collectively at a group of people or a nationality, much less a religion. And yet at the same time, we also had to be honest, because for some, the identity and the motivation of the attackers, the 19 and those behind them, the likes of Osama bin Laden and Al-Qaeda, could not simply be rendered invisible as if they disappeared from the story, and instead were replaced by these kind of anodyne words like the killers or the assassins or the terrorists, as if they had no other identity. They had an identity. They had a belief system. They had, as was said by Ms. Farid, they hijacked a religion, and they spoke in the name of their demented view of that religion. They were not there to ask for meals on wheels or some kind of economic benefit. They were there to advance an ideology that motivated them to kill 3,000 people and to attack the United States and to attack elsewhere in the world in the months and years thereafter. And we have to be clear-eyed about that ideology. And we have to be clear-eyed in responding to that ideology, in rejecting any attempt at extremism or radicalization in the name of that or other ideologies that would divide our country or even seek to destroy that country. So the lessons of 9/11 are not just for those of us who were there on that day and who witnessed on our television screens, or in the case of those of us here at AJC, the street scenes. So literally thousands and thousands of people from Lower Manhattan who had no way to leave the area but to walk and walk up avenues like 3rd Avenue, which I see from my office. And for us to see them, the thousands of people covered in dust, and to watch the wind shift to the north and bring with it, presumably, dust that carried human remains as it came up in this kind of gray cloud up avenues like 3rd Avenue together with those people. Those are things we can't remember, but it's a reminder not just for those who saw it then, but a reminder today. Democracy is precious. Democracy is fragile. There are people and ideologies and beliefs out there that want to attack us for who we are as a nation, not because we're Republicans or Democrats or white or black or Christian or Muslim or Jewish, but simply for who we are as a nation, for what we conceive of as the promise of America. And we, AJC, and generations to come, must always stand vigilant. We must always stand alert. For me, these are the enduring lessons of 9/11.
Thank you, David, for reminding us vividly what that day was like and what it represented, and inspiring us to continue the important work that we do every day to prevent ever happening again a horrible day like 9/11, and in hope that we will bring together our nation with strength as we continue to labor on in the commitments that we hold sacred. We conclude today's commemoration of the 20th anniversary of 9/11 with prayer. We have chosen the 23rd Psalm, familiar to many as a memorial prayer in our traditions. All the words speak for themselves, but perhaps, yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me, speaks loudest today. Yes, 9/11 was the valley of the shadow of death, but it is not where we choose to remain. We have walked through the valley. Together, we are filled with hope and optimism. As the psalmist says, surely goodness and mercy shall follow us all the days of our lives. Please join me in the Hebrew and English as you are able, beginning with the Hebrew. Mizmor LeDavid, Adonai ro'i lo echsar, binot deshe yarbitzeni, al mei menuchot yinahaleni, nafshi yeshovev, yancheni v'magalei tzedek lema'an shemo. Gam ki elech begetz al mavet, lo irara ki ata imadi, shiftecha umishantecha, hema yinachamuni, ta'aroch lefanai shulchan neged tzorerai, dishanta vasheben roshi kosi revaya, ach tov v'chesed, Yirdafuni kol yemei chayai, V'shavti beveit Adonai, le'orech yamim. And now we will continue in English. The Lord is my shepherd. I shall not want. God maketh me to lie down in green pastures. God leadeth me beside the still waters. God restoreth my soul. God guideth me in straight paths for God's name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou anointest my head with oil, my cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Amen. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for coming together to commemorate this day. We wish you a Shabbat Shalom and a Shana Tova.